Chapter 26. True Love. At last. My experience of hiring a male escort, and the fun of sublime sex with him, made me realize how much I was missing real passion in my life. I've no doubt that I excited my paid-for-handsome young partner that night in the hotel bedroom, and the naughtiness of the situation and his hunky body certainly excited me. Despite my earlier doubts, I didn't have the slightest regret about what I'd chosen to do in order to relieve my sexual frustration. In fact, I had to give myself a serious talking to in order to resist the temptation to do it all over again a few days later. I can be a greedy girl when the mood takes me. Nevertheless, there's a world of difference between the forced passion of commercial sex and the heart-warming satisfaction that comes from making love to a much-desired, real-life partner. It is a difference I'm aware of in my day-to-day working life, fulfilling the BDSM fantasies of men, women, and couples who are all seeking a form of sexual excitement that they cannot easily find elsewhere. Men profess to love me all of the time. In the throes of sexual excitement, when I have stretched and tormented and bullied their bodies into climactic submission, their emotions can run away with their minds and they'll gasp out their adoration for me. "I love you, mistress. Thank you, mistress. Thank you. Please hurt me again," are phrases I hear all the time. The trick is for neither them or me to take it too seriously. I call it mind-fucking my clients, leading them by the hand into what some term subspace, a slightly altered consciousness where nothing matters for that moment other than the pleasure and excitement flooding their system. That's when they will love me for a while. Once their lust has been satiated and their minds recover, then they want to get off home to normal life and to their much-loved wives and families. There are a few rare exceptions to the rule. The one or two men who do fall genuinely, head over heels in love with me, and become addicted to my company, however much I hurt or mistreat them. To be fair, I do always try to warn them when I recognize the early symptoms of Miranda addiction. "Be careful, slave. You're going to get hurt," I tell them. "Keep on seeing me and I'll fuck your mind to the point where you won't be able to stop. Are you sure you want to do this?" On the rarest of occasions, I will have to nip the addiction in the bud and tell a particularly obsessed fan that my door is no longer open to his visits. But if they're not too much of a nuisance about it, then I don't mind men loving me. They're the only ones in danger. Loving me can seriously damage your bank balance. One client who I've known for well over a decade once asked me, "What's it like to be loved by everybody you meet?" He saw the look of surprise on my face and explained, "Don't you understand? You are our ultimate fantasy woman because we all want to be the one who is under your guidance 24/7. In our fantasy world, we all want to be the one you are with." I had never really thought about that, to be honest. I suppose not many people spend their working day being an adored goddess, which is exactly the term he uses for me. A slightly strange thought, but not at all unpleasant. This particular slave delights in telling people that I'm his religion. In that box on government census form that demands to know your religious affiliations, he writes, Mirandite. He is the founder, and one of very few members, of the Mirandite cult. He worships at my feet, and it's no exaggeration to say that his entire life revolves around me. Despite that, I am grounded in reality. I truly am. I know that I'm just like everybody else, but that I do attract men who are seeking a woman to put on a pedestal and worship. There is a fetish magazine publisher I know who complains that some of the mistresses he deals with get false ideas about their own status in life. Honestly, Miranda, some of them think their shit doesn't stink. He jokes, "At least you never fall for your own hype." With all that in mind, my own flirtation with paid for fun and games simply made me think that it was about time that I sorted out my own unimpressive love life once and for all. As you'll have realized by now, my track record with men wasn't great. I was into my 30s with 2 disastrous and lengthy relationships behind me, both of them with total losers. Although I'd have been too modest to say it at the time, it was clear that neither man had been remotely as intelligent as me, and neither had been worldly wise or sophisticated enough to open my eyes to all the cultural and intellectual treats that London had to offer. Even more worrying, neither of them had ever been great shakes between the sheets, and each had soon lost all desire to keep me sexually satisfied. I'd devoted myself to building up my business with barely an evening off in years, and both of my partners had been perfect couch potatoes. I had always wanted to live life more fully. I wanted to go into town for fun nights out. I wanted to go out for meals, and I wanted to travel. My former partners hadn't been interested in that at all. My last boyfriend had particularly firm views on the subject. If the telly's on and there's beer in the fridge, why would I want to go out? He was fat and lazy and rejected any suggestion that London might be interesting. Why do I need to go into London? I don't want to go into London. Although I criticize the guys, I am aware that I'm not entirely blameless. Here, people have asked me why I didn't go out and do things with girlfriends. Why didn't I go out on my own to experience all that our capital city has to offer? The answer is that sometimes it was hard to give up the money when the choice is a night out in town on your own or earning £1,000 with a client. I too often came down on the side of the cash. Me maxima culpa. The truth is that I had nobody but myself to blame. I'd been content to lazily slip into each train wreck of a relationship, simply because that was easier than finding a suitable man. What on earth had I been thinking of? I determined that the next guy would be different. If I could recruit the perfect escort with a little effort and internet research, then surely I could find my perfect long-term partner in just the same way. Several weeks went by before I put my dating plan into action. Then one day I thought, right, now is the time for me to find someone new. But I was facing the problem that faces a lot of single women every day. Where the hell do you go looking for a man? I hardly drank at the time, and the only place you would ever find me, if I wasn't at work, was in training in the gym. Even then, although I was always trying to keep my body in shape for work, that would only be for an hour each evening. It's also not the best meeting place. So where do you meet people? I honestly don't know. So I thought, bugger it, I'm going to start looking on the internet. That, of course, created a new dilemma. If I logged onto straight internet dating sites and was in any way honest about myself, then normal men were going to think I was some kind of nutter. If on the other hand I used fetish sites and mentioned what my job was, then I'd be inundated with wannabe slaves. I didn't quite know what to do. The other worry was that my former boyfriend was still sleeping downstairs in my house. I think he had a vague hope that if he stuck around for long enough, then we might get back together again. Now, told him in the clearest possible terms, I'm looking for another man. We're finished. It's all over. This is an ex-relationship. You have to go right now. It's my house and you have to leave. At long last, he finally took my subtle hints and left. The way was clear for finding the perfect replacement. I joined a website called alt.com, which described itself as being for the BDSM alternative community, and which had a dating section allowing you to put up messages seeking new friendships. I didn't mention that I was a professional dominatrix, but I did make it clear that I was very much a dominant woman, hoping to meet a submissive man. After a few false starts, one man started writing regularly. Tony's emails were flirty and fun, and he seemed to be an intelligent guy. When I saw his picture, I realized he was also good looking and had a great body. Although I was being ultra cautious, I did slowly grow more and more interested. I began to look forward to his messages each day. We wrote to each other a lot, discussing the fetishes which had drawn us to this alternative website. In the first place, I was careful to play it cool, really cool, and so after my original contact I let him do all of the chasing. He would email or text a message and I would reply, but I was never the one who instigated the next call. Soon we were sending emails backwards and forwards. He was discussing what he liked, and we were creating various fantasy scenes and writing stories to titillate each other. I remember once I sent him a text message describing how I was sitting at my desk and wishing that he was kneeling on the floor in front of me. I went on to tell him precisely how I was going to bury his head between my legs and use his tongue for my pleasure. Tony's heartfelt reply made me giggle. I am standing in Waterstones with the hard on. Not good. Actually, after months of living like a nun, that sounded pretty good to me. This was an experience I had never had before. It may have been courtship by emails and texts, rather than face-to-face contact, but for the first time in my life, I was actually being wooed by a man. Previously, I'd always jumped into relationships as a matter of convenience. I'd never made men work hard to catch me. I'd fallen into their laps with little effort on their part. Now, I had a man trying hard to impress me, a man who really wanted to be with me. I can't even remember at what stage of our internet friendship I told Tony I was a professional dominatrix, but I do remember that it didn't worry him at all. My new friend was open and honest with me, and told me that he didn't have much experience. He said that he dabbled in BDSM games with a former lover, but hadn't explored it as deeply as he wished. There were a lot of specific things he wanted to try. Between us, we would craft elaborate scenarios and fantasies which I knew were exciting. I was enjoying myself immensely as the emails flew back and forth, with each of us teasing the other about what would one day happen between us. By now I was sure that I wanted to meet him in person, but there was to be yet a further delay. I'd recently had surgery on my knee and I thought, I can't arrange a meeting with this really fit guy and then turn up hobbling around on a bad knee. I've got to be patient and wait. Eventually, a few weeks after Christmas, I agreed to a meeting. We both knew by then that this would end up in the bedroom, and I'd already picked a local hotel. I hope you'll excuse me if this is one sexual encounter about which I don't go into all of the naughty details. This one was just too personally special to share. Suffice it to say that his body was amazing and his mind was even better. We clicked immediately and couldn't stop talking, even though we were both desperate to get to the room and start exploring those wild sexual fantasies we'd talked about for months. When we did finally end up in bed, the sex was mind-blowingly good for both of us. By the end of the night, I knew two things. I wanted this man in my life, and the last thing I was going to do was let him know that. I was pretty sure that Tony was as smitten with me as I secretly was with him. The number of texts and emails he sent me in the days that followed seemed to confirm that. I had such a great time. You're wonderful. When are we meeting again? He asked, over and over again. Being the cruel mistress that I am, it was easy for me to simply ignore every mention of a future meeting. Instead, I would email him back, chatting away as though nothing had happened and just being sexy and friendly and fun. Yes, but when are we going to meet up again? He demanded with ever-increasing urgency. I could tell I was driving him crazy, but was determined not to let him think that he'd impressed me in the way that he actually had. I did, after all, have vast experience of teasing men and keeping them strictly in their place. I kept him dangling for weeks. Finally, he reached his breaking point. Okay, he wrote. I'll leave it with you. I can see you aren't keen to meet up again. I'll leave the ball in your court. Oh well, I replied, how about Wednesday next week? Even then I was being somewhat cruel to the poor guy. I knew that he worked in central London and that his job meant waking up ridiculously early on weekdays. It would have been so much easier for him to see me at the weekend, but I didn't want to make this easy, as I'd hoped. He didn't even argue. No problem. Wednesday, it is then. Definitely. From then onwards the relationship blossomed. We were meeting a couple of times a week and having fantastic, mind-blowing sex. I knew that I'd met someone very special. After years of living with losers, Tony was on a par with me, and I was overwhelmed with sexual attraction towards him. It was so good to meet a man with a like mind to me. The great body and the fact that he was very well hung were a bonus. Most definitely a bonus. He was still working in town and, for the first time I was being taken out properly on dates and exploring the city in which I'd lived for all of my life. There was a memorable evening a few weeks into our relationship when he took me out to a top-class, Michelin-starred restaurant. It was something my former partners would never have dreamt of doing for me. I felt I was truly in a genuine relationship, being wooed in a way that all girls should be wooed. I realized how much of life I'd been missing up. Until then, Tony was showing me how a relationship should start, if it means to go on in the bedroom too. Our new life together was a revelation. For the first time I felt that I was fully exploring my own sexuality, discovering pleasures that I had never experienced before. I know that probably sounds odd to your ears, because I had been sessioning for years and exploring a myriad of wonderfully kinky things in my working life. The truth was that I had been fulfilling everyone else's fantasies and dreams, but never having my own fully explored or fully met. I had always got a sexual kick out of my work, but never the sort of sexual excitement and enjoyment that my relationship with Tony was now providing in full. Even more importantly, I felt I had met my soulmate, not only for the support and companionship he was giving me, but also because he was ticking all the boxes that previously had been missing from my life. Tony made me a whole person and made me very happy. We've since been together for more than 5 years, and we now work together as well, building my businesses in a way I could never have done on my own. Some long while after our friendship had turned into love and our lives had become inextricably intertwined, I mentioned to Tony that I missed the sexy emails and texts that he once used to send me. They were my wildest dreams and fantasies, he told me. Why do I need fantasies anymore? I've got the real thing. A short while ago, Tony and I got engaged. My grandfather always said that his dearest wish was to walk me down the aisle, but until I met my current partner I had no intention of doing that. I'd always thought, what a shame that granddad's never going to get his wish, but marriage isn't for me. My grandfather is long gone now, of course, and I miss him every day, but it may not be a bad thing that he won't be at my wedding because I have some very specific ideas as to how it might be. It will be a ceremony fit for a dominatrix princess. To hell with the virgin white dress. Everyone else can wear white. I'm planning on wearing a kinky, blue latex creation. That will blow my husband's mind. In my head, my idea of marriage is dragging my man, kicking and screaming, into my cells. Then, after the slave auction is over, the half a dozen hunky, well-hung, best men can have my full attention. I have many flights of fancy like this on an hourly basis. Please don't tell my fiancé. Chapter 27. A star of stage and screen. Finding my soulmate has benefited not only my social life, but also my business career. I've long had a presence on the web, but it was a bonus to discover that my partner Tony was an experienced IT consultant and could revolutionize the websites which were becoming more and more important for my company. With his help, I've expanded both my private members club site and have boosted the sales of my films across various internet platforms. Together, we've opened up a whole new world of international business. Our latest venture has seen us launch a new film clip site, hosting films that have been produced not just by my production company, but by other dominatrices both here and in Europe. I'm constantly amazed by how comfortable I feel when performing in front of the camera. At school, speaking in front of a crowd would have been anathema to me. I never wanted to be singled out. I felt uncomfortable hearing my own voice and having others listen to me. Even reading out loud in class made me wish that the ground would open up and swallow me whole. None of that was because I couldn't read well, but because others were hearing my voice. When it came to school plays, I would seek out the most insignificant one-line roles, although even then my nerves would overcome me and ensure that I would fluff my one tiny line. The fact that I was so retiring is one of the reasons why my spelling remains poor to this day. I was too shy to ever draw attention to myself by even asking for help. in spelling difficult words. So, how what is it now that once the camera starts rolling I can chat away for England? Part of it is that I am usually talking about a subject dear to my heart: bondage, domination, and the humiliation of my ever-willing slaves. A filming day is a fun mix of sex, naughtiness, laughter, a lot of stress, and what I like to believe is organized chaos. My office, normally my haven of peace and quiet to which I can escape for a moment during a busy day of mistreating multiple clients, becomes a dressing room, makeup salon, and film crew canteen all rolled into one. Were you a fly on the wall, you would see some interesting sights. I can often be found half naked in the middle of an essential costume change. There may be other beautiful mistresses or petite slave girls in a similar state of dishabille. My cameramen will stroll through us all seeking batteries or tripods, and a trusted owned slave will be satisfying my constant demand for more coffee. The doorbell will chime as volunteer slaves turn up for filming sessions. Telephones will ring with new clients seeking appointments, and in the dungeon outside other actors will be struggling into tight leather pants or shiny rubber body bags. It may appear at first that all is confusion, but that is not the case. I rule over my empire with a rod of iron. Woe betide those who mess up my schedule for the day. Filming is a demanding and expensive business. Even on non-filming days, my dungeon will be busy with a succession of clients arriving at regular intervals throughout the day, and there's always a ton of cleaning, sterilizing, and tidying up to do between each appointment. Each of my rooms is thoroughly cleaned after each appointment, and I will need to ensure that the correct equipment is in place and instantly to hand to give my next client precisely the service that he or she may require. On top of all that, my business, like any other commercial concern, runs on paperwork, invoices to be prepared, supplies to be ordered, financial records to be kept, and a master diary of all of the daily activities to be maintained. Peculiarly to an adult business such as mine, the confidentiality of my clients is all important. For that reason, my financial and tax papers record no names whatsoever. All of my clients are known to me via a series of unidentifiable code words or nicknames. One of the major changes that my partner has helped me institute within the business has been the concept of longer-term strategic thinking. Because of the way I drifted into my work as a dominatrix, planning for the future was never a strong point. That was partly a factor of operating on the fringes of society, never quite knowing if my premises would be shut down or what the future might hold. I was also working on my own, with nobody I trusted to help focus ideas. It's just in my nature to be always full of dreams and always wanting to be busy. Many years ago, a friend coined the nickname whirlwind for me. You've always got 5 things in your head at once, he said. Slow down, slow down. On the positive side, I do have some notable business strengths. I'm always on the ball with answering emails and telephone calls. I'm never late for my sessions, and I'm pretty good at scheduling not overlapping appointments and avoiding general cock-ups. I think I've done okay. I'm sometimes asked what advice I would give to any woman wanting to emulate me and start up as an aspiring young dominatrix. There's only one answer, which is to get yourself £50,000 in the bank first, because you'll need the equipment. There are plenty of competing mistresses out there who seek to offer specialties such as corporal punishment, foot worship, face sitting, or whatever, and who think the only equipment they need is a cane or some thigh boots. The problem is that men will visit them once and never return. If you aren't prepared to put in the investment to do the job properly, men soon realize you are not seriously interested in the game and will look elsewhere for those who are. My own deliciously equipped premises have been furnished and crafted over many years. I pride myself on having equipment most men can only dream of, but I'm always seeking more. Every international film trip now has to include a visit to the local fetish equipment suppliers. I'm still a sucker for anything new. That desire for novelty has led me to search for new and exciting film locations and for contacts in the adult film industry. I make frequent visits to various European cities: Berlin, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Madrid, and so on, to meet and film with other dominatrices. Each girl and each location brings a flavor of the kinks of her own country and culture. I rarely return from such visits without a new idea to incorporate into my own play. Back in London, one market, the biggest of them all, has proved a tougher nut to crack. Ever since I was a little girl, had always been fascinated by the sights and the sounds of America. My little girl fantasy figure of Madonna and the American life I saw on television all made me want to be there. One of the few regrets in my working life had been turning down the chance to work in California many years ago. However much I would have loved to work there, it would have been too big a leap at the time. The USA adult film market was dominated by close-knit BDSM communities and by the few major companies. My approaches to some of the major film companies had never been successful. Now, it was trying again. Hollywood was calling. I had to answer that call. Chapter 28. The American Dream. In the summer of 2013, just 6 months before the milestone of my 40th birthday, finally achieved a lifetime ambition to break into the toughest, the most competitive, and potentially the most lucrative adult market in the world, the American film business. This was not Hollywood. This was far better than that. I had arrived in San Francisco to make movies with some of the most creative and imaginative bondage experts on the west coast of America. Ahead of me lay further film dates with one of America's most successful doms in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and filming sessions in a famous BDSM parlor in New York. As my British Airways flight touched down at San Francisco's modern and stylish international airport, I couldn't help but think how far, both emotionally and geographically, a lost little girl from a council estate in West London had come. From a teenage student cycling nervously through the streets to fulfill my first dominatrix appointments, to an internationally recognized performer traveling by limo in America. I'm sorry to say that it was hard for a moment not to be just a little immodest. I felt that the bondage mistress had arrived. My breakthrough had come by not targeting the faceless corporations, which control much of the USA film world. Instead, I'd concentrated on making personal contact with fellow mistresses in the US. I wrote letter after letter to the women I genuinely admired, seeking invitations to visit and work with them on their side of the Atlantic. Over time, my persistence paid off, and soon I was able to plan my first film trip in the USA. After such a lot of effort, my first night in San Francisco did not disappoint. My London-based camera crew and I were collected from the airport by a film company representative, and an hour later, we were admiring the astonishing studio premises of the team from the Serious Bondage production company, tucked away in a quiet residential street to the south of the city. The company produces many of the best bondage films in America. There too, internationally available websites cater for both femdom enthusiasts, and as you would expect in the gay-friendly town of San Fran, to a growing audience of same-sex bondage fans. For a self-confessed restriction equipment freak like me, this was bondage heaven. Shrugging off the weariness of the long flight, I set off for a delicious meal of Pacific snapper in one of the friendly restaurant bars nearby, and then decided that filming could wait while I had some American fun. One of my favorite clients, a regular visitor to see me in London, was based just a few miles away in the pressure cooker environment of Silicon Valley. Knowing that I was visiting the area, he had been begging for weeks for the chance to meet. It took just moments for me to call and arrange a special treat for my computer geek friend. Within the hour, he was standing naked in front of me in one of Serious Bondage's extensively equipped playrooms. Around us on the walls was a cornucopia of chains, manacles, hoods, cages, and the astonishing range of elaborate equipment that appear in the company's films. I, however, had been plotting for weeks to reduce my American slave to a submissive mind state he had never experienced before. This particular client is extremely claustrophobic and had confessed to me months before that his greatest terror was of being buried alive. perhaps not the wisest phobia to be afflicted with in a city synonymous with earthquakes. It was a confession I had stored away for future use and had never forgotten. This night, I had decided, he was going in the pit. In the center of a wooden patio deck built out behind the film company's studio is one of the prized possessions of the serious bondage crew. A concrete-lined, 6-feet-long underground chamber with a heavy, foot-thick hatch that can be padlocked in place. Once shut, it allows barely the tiniest chinks of light to filter through into the depths below. Still in the summer dress in which I had traveled out from London, I led my submissive onto the deck and showed him the hole. He was by now visibly shaking and begging that I should inflict any other punishment I wanted, if I would grant a reprieve from the horrors of a night underground. Just for a moment I considered taking pity on the wretch and finding another game to play, but I had waited a long time to bring the slave truly to heel, and no self-respecting bondage mistress can ever go back on her word. I enlisted the help of Dalton, my serious bondage host, to fit a straitjacket in place and then ordered my victim into the pit. He was soon chained to the shackles on the wall, a necessary precaution to foil any attempt he might make to touch his cock in the hours ahead. In the end, I actually had to stand on his head to force him down far enough for the hatch to be lowered and locked into place. It meant his last sight of the open evening air was a clear view of my knickers as he stared up my skirt. A little sexy gift from me as a parting reward for his submission. Now, the more attentive of my readers will have remembered my repeated assertions that sanity and safety are always at the forefront of my mind in every bondage session. From long experience, I knew that leaving anyone bound, locked up, and alone is potentially deadly. It is something I have never countenanced over the years, even when clients have begged me for long-term lonely bondage. So as I left my slaves muffled, frantic, begging pleas behind me and returned to the house, I was not truly abandoning him without the prospect of help if he needed to be freed. A hidden beauty of the pit is a night vision camera and audio system that constantly monitors what is happening underground and provides a real-time visual and audio feed to computer screens in the building. In my somewhat jet-lagged state, I am not sure quite how long we did leave my Silicon Valley slave in his claustrophobic hell, but watching his panic build and listening to his increasingly desperate pleas for help was an amusing end to what had been a busy day. The next day, my hosts had provided other American slaves for me to torment on camera, and I had the world's most kinky-friendly city in which to do it. One of the reasons for visiting San Francisco was the possibility of a level of public play not easily available in London. I'm not sure that this most liberal of cities quite knew what had hit it over the following 3 days of Miss Miranda mayhem. Stopping the traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge, wheeling a straitjacket-bound and hooded slave along a busy road in public to a city center cafe, and riding the cable cars in full rubber domination uniform, these were just some of the highlights of that USA trip. Day 1 started with me strapping my own traveling slave into a white canvas straitjacket, dressing him in fetching turquoise hospital pants and a heavy-duty white canvas hood, and then taking him out for a public outing to accompany me seeing the sights of San Francisco. I was not sure that even this laid-back town was ready for me in full rubber nurse outfit, wheeling my slave package across the famous Golden Gate Bridge on a luggage cart, but nobody complained. We did, however, have our pictures taken by a large number of locals and tourists. My shapely tush, as they call an arse over there, barely covered by my mini-length nurse's outfit, did attract a lot of honking attention from a host of American truck drivers. Oh, yes, and the bridge was a great sight too. Next stop for my wheelie slave, tied upright onto my trolley, was the Aladdin's Cave of the Mr. S. Leather Shop, one of the great bondage stores of the world. As you would expect in this gay capital of San Francisco, most of my fellow shoppers were from the leather biking community, but they accepted this humble visiting British dominatrix warmly into the heart of their USA gay world. The assistants could not have been more helpful as I showed them my gag slave, still tied to his trolley, and explained that I was badly in need of their best and biggest strap-on cock in order to complete the next stage of his treatment and training. And oh boy, does Mr. S have a good selection of strap-ons to choose from. I was spoiled for choice as I removed my slave's blindfold so that he could appreciate the size of the dildo that was later going to stretch of posterior. I think he appreciated the gesture, but it is never easy to be certain when he is mumbling and drooling through his canvas hood like that. Never being able to resist new devices for my teasing and tormenting games, I also had to pick up a unique double gag that I knew would come in very handy on slave multi-days back home. Finally, it was back home to serious bondage for some truly serious, kinky fun with their extensive range of equipment. With the sun now dipping low on the patio deck, I wanted to try out another unique feature of the hole, and so I placed a slave inside with just his head and only his head left above ground to see the daylight fading. It is a surreal sight to see a disembodied head, seemingly detached from its owner, popping up through a head-sized hole in the middle of the patio floor. The pleading look in his eyes made me laugh so much that I almost wet myself. Well, to be honest, I did wet myself in order to produce a full golden shower of my special champagne all over his face. I think the film that was shot of him trying to cope with being both scared and half drowned with the gushing flow is a classic that my club site members will enjoy over and over again. In the years to come, the following day, my hosts encouraged me to demonstrate the pleasures and delights of mummification, a very particular specialty in the bondage lexicon. I actually used my more than willing fiancé, Tony, for this sexy mummification scene. It turned into an intense and lengthy session, with roll after roll after roll of film and packing tape being used to turn him into a tightly bound and very heavy guy, immovably fixed and buried deep under layer after layer of plastic, all stretched tight around a body-shaped frame in the open air. As the cameras rolled to record the entire event for posterity, slowly wrapped each limb to ensure a perfectly symmetrical start and then taped a bondage helmet in place over his face. With Tony, now utterly helpless and his head tightly wrapped apart from a carefully maintained air opening, I could feel him relaxing and enjoying the experience more with every passing second. By the time I was happy with the result, the gray metal finish resembled a giant suit of armor, with an artistically created band of red around his groin like a pair of Superman pants. It was a little touch of which I was especially proud. That first filming trip to several American cities proved a great success. I made new contacts with a range of USA filmmakers and bondage models, and was soon followed by another invitation to visit Los Angeles and Hollywood itself. My partner and I did all of the usual tourist essentials, including the Hollywood Walk of Fame and the famous Muscle Beach, before getting down to the serious business of making movies. The visit was notable for my first filming sessions with one of the stars of American BDSM movies, the beautiful young masochist, Elise Graves. With her enthusiastic encouragement to really let my sadistic side loose on her body, I made Elise weep real tears of pain and sheer terror, the fiercest of clamps all over her body, endless breath control, and the fact that I was laughing at her distress, all combined to send her close to the edge. I was quite proud of myself to see real fear in her eyes and real tears on her cheeks. I think what she may not have anticipated was that I was not only going to make it hard for her to breathe with the restrictive leather hood, I was also going to push some of my freshly worn underwear under the hood to make her life even tougher. Elise loved every moment of her torment. What a thoughtful mistress I am, too kind for my own good once again. To balance that kindness, I determined to be a little more cruel than usual. With the rest of her session, I had bought a vast number of strong white clips which attach easily to metal hooks, and can therefore be strung out from the body in all sorts of fascinating and unusual ways. Batches of these clamps on the skin under her arms, on her breast and nipples, and even stretching her pussy lips wide apart, soon had the tears running down her face. Tightly strapped to a bondage board which I could swing at will. Elise reminded me of the old British wallpaper advert in which a man dangles helplessly, attached to a board. He couldn't have been more helpless then. Elise was as I played with her clitoral hood and repeatedly took away her air. I was having the time of my life torturing this beautiful girl, and soon found myself laughing as she wriggled, pulling on her own nipples and crying out of control. The more she cried, the happier she made me, and soon brought in the final straw to try and take her up to her limits. One of my American purchases was a magic wand vibrator that also delivers a sharp and painful electric shock if I pushed the right button. Many of my London slaves would be feeling its sting soon enough. Now, however, I started stroking it across Elise's body to induce a mix of pain and sexual pleasure that brought our session to a close. Any film shoot, whether for television broadcast or for an adult movie, is an expensive and time-consuming process. Using top-of-the-range, professional cameras and the most skilled production personnel is essential to ensure the correct end result of which I can be proud. For me, the technical excellence is almost as important as the erotic bondage and BDSM content. Perhaps a sign of how my life has gone full circle. When I was a 19-year-old student, I wanted nothing more than to build a career in the television or film world. Now, that's happening to me 20 years later, from an unexpected direction, as I become the executive producer and the on-screen star of productions by my own video production company. In this internet age, the television and film industries are evolving faster and faster by the day. On my last visit to Los Angeles, I was involved in what I believe represents the future of the television industry throughout the world. I was the main guest on an hour-long television talk show streamed across the web and watched by hundreds of thousands of viewers in the comfort of their own homes. From a tiny LA studio, the Extreme Restraints website transmits a series of chat shows themed around heavy bondage and BDSM play. As the cameras rolled, I discussed my sexuality, my game-playing techniques, and my love of fetish and bondage equipment with the two presenters. Then, taking advantage of the artistic and sexual freedom of the USA internet-based show, I was able to demonstrate some of my bondage tastes upon the beautiful body of a naked and very willing model, because this was a web-based program rather than a national broadcast show. It is truly an international event. Viewers could log in and watch for free from anywhere in the world, a fact well illustrated by the number of comments I received about my performance when I returned home to London. All in all, the trip was once again an unqualified success. It's confirmed my belief that working more closely with American co-producers offers unrivaled opportunities for my own UK-based film business to expand. In the words of one of Hollywood's most memorable characters, "I'll be back." Chapter 29, Reflections. I've found that writing a book about oneself can be a fascinating voyage of self-discovery. I can thoroughly recommend the experience. As I write what may be the last words of my story so far, I'm fast approaching my 40th birthday, perhaps time for a little self-assessment of my life, my loves, and my career. And yet, until now, I've never much looked back at my childhood and how it may have affected my life. A short while ago, I heard a radio interview with the German-born artist Frank Auerbach, who, as a child in the Second World War, lost both parents at an early age. The details of our two stories couldn't be more different, yet his words struck a chord with me. I found myself admiring a philosophy which he explained more succinctly than I could ever have done. "I'm not given to self-analysis," he said. "It never strikes me as fruitful. Given this brief space between life and death, I think the thing to do is to get on with it. It's get on, or get out. So, given that I share his distaste of looking backwards, I'm surprised that this book has awakened so many half-forgotten memories of events which probably shaped me in ways I may never quite understand. Over time, I've become thick-skinned about things which once stung me greatly. Might I have buried some memories as a psychological defense mechanism? Or am I now exaggerating the impact of events that didn't truly matter at the time? Perhaps that's a debate best left for others to judge. The childhood memories that hurt me the most relate to the differences between life with my grandparents and the life of others in my family. There were small but distinct differences which together added up to more than the sum of their parts. Many subtle slights which hardly would have been noticed by my birth mother, but which highlighted the constant divide between my family and her family. Without trying to sound like a poor, downtrodden, pantomime cinders, real divisions did exist between me and my half-siblings. Many of my clothes were hand-me-downs from neighbors, and I knew that major items such as a smart new dress or a new set of trainers were only for Christmas. In fact, I always did rather well at Christmas because my birth mother and other relatives would ensure I had toys, but the rest of the year was less fruitful. I had the warmth of my grandparents' love, but my room was as cold as an ice well, perhaps affecting my day-to-day life more than anything else. My birth mother's family and all of my friends' families had the amazing luxury of a car. My aged granddad couldn't drive. He, Nan, and I could only take the bus. Some childhood memories can hurt more than others. When I was about 9 years old, not long after I had learned of my birth mother's existence, I was hugely impressed to hear that she and her husband and her other young children had gone on holiday to Spain. To this day I can remember wondering at the amount of money it must have cost to go on an aeroplane to a foreign country. When they got back, my birth mother came round to my house with tiny trinket presents for my grandparents and for me. I have no idea all these years on what those presents might have been, but I can still recall Eileen showing off her tan to my grandmother in the kitchen. I had never been abroad and wanted to ask, "Why didn't you take me?" By the time I was just a little older, was already self-censoring my financial demands. On one occasion, all of the children in my class were offered the chance of a short cruise as an educational trip. I knew it wasn't for me. Nan and Granddad would never be able to afford it, and so I didn't even ask. It's not nice for them to have to tell me they don't have that money to spare, I thought. It's not right to upset them. When my grandparents later heard that everyone but me was going on the ship, they asked my birth mother if she could help, which I instinctively knew was awkward for them to do. I think Eileen and her husband did offer the money, but by then all of the places had gone. One last example which springs to mind now seems so trivial that I hardly dare to mention it, and yet it was important to me at the time. The tale of the Nat West piggies. The pigs in question were a set of souvenir, ceramic, piggy banks given free to children who opened a savings account. The more money you saved, the more members of the piggy family you could collect. The bank advertised the offer on television, an advertisement which I watched so often that I can still sing the tune. An aunt gave me a few pounds to open an account and collect pig number 1 of the set, a little nappy-clad piglet called Woody. Other children at school were collecting not only Woody's sister Annabelle, but also the more expensive figures of the Mummy and Daddy Pigs. I innocently asked my Nan if I could put more money in the savings account to get the next pig in line. There was the most dismissive of answers. "Sorry, Miranda, you know we don't have the money for silliness like that. Just be happy with the little baby pig that you've got. He's adorable, isn't he?" I resolved to put the piggy family out of my mind, and soon enough the craze died down at school. I probably had forgotten by then that Woody still sat in glorious isolation in my bedroom cupboard. I would never have thought any more about it, except that some months later I visited my birth mother and played in my baby half-sister's warm and cozy bedroom. I could hardly believe what I saw. There, arranged in 2 neat rows on her bedroom window sill, sat the entire piggy family group. She owned Woody, Annabelle, Big Brother Maxwell, and even pig parents, Lady Hillary and Sir Nathaniel. I went home that day with nobody having the faintest clue why I was feeling sad. I couldn't tell anyone what had hurt me. The truth is that, however silly it was, I'd been gutted by her having the entire set. The tale had a postscript many years later when I jokingly mentioned my childhood disappointment to a friend. Days later, opened a package delivered to my dungeon and found a complete Nat West pig family in pristine condition, carefully wrapped and given as a present. Looking back now, I'd see that none of these things really mattered, but at the time they were quite crushing. It's hard once in a while not to look at family life from my perspective and question why some of the choices were made in the way they were. I truly believe my birth mother loved me. I truly believe that she acted in the way she thought might be right. And yet her actions, her rejection of my position as her firstborn child, and her unwillingness to accept me into her second family must have influenced my life in various ways. My birth mother and I are now the closest of friends. I love her and I know she loves me. Neither of us would ever wish to hurt the other. From talking to her many times since my grandparents' passing, I know that she did what she felt to be right at the time. And how can I ever understand the position she was in? I will never be an unmarried 16-year-old girl struggling to cope in the 1970s. I will never be able to fully appreciate the pressure she was under when that happened. Who am I to sit in judgment upon her? All that I can try and judge is what effect nurture had over nature in shaping my life. Did childhood envy and my grandparents' relative poverty make me more money conscious than others might have been? Did my older than usual parents lack the empathy and control which might have led my teenage self along a different track? Did being homeless and thrown onto my own resources at such an early age shape the independence and the drive that has characterized my business life? Did teenage erotic adventures set my sexuality on a course that still determines my own adventurous sex life and the profession I follow to this day? You may have your own opinions about those questions and your own opinions about my admittedly unusual lifestyle and career. Truth is, I cannot know the answers, and perhaps I shouldn't ask. My working life brings men to my feet and offers endless excitement and fun. My filming career scratches the itch of my urge to be creative. I'm reconciled in a loving friendship with the woman I can finally call Mom. And, above all, my loving partner has filled in the final missing piece in the jigsaw of my particular life. I am a happy woman. What more could anyone want?